Advocates say that these techniques aren't just a get-out-of-jail-free card on the climate. They argue that they're likely to be necessary no matter what else we do, because the amount of total warming that we expect, the amount of warming that the world will experience, depends on the total accumulation of CO2 in the atmosphere. This means that even if we drastically cut our emissions right now, warming will continue well into the future. And if we don't get our act together soon, the use of these techniques may be necessary sooner rather than later. Be that as it may, critics of geoengineering, and there are a lot of them, have several complaints about this strategy. The first is that it's a form of avoiding the hard choices that we have to make with regard to carbon emissions, a sort of technological solutionism in which we avoid dealing with our problems and count on future technology to solve the problem for us. More practically, they question whether it's going to reduce the urgency of the need to reduce our carbon emissions if the public thinks there's an easy technological fix coming right around the corner. The other problem has to do with how easy that easy fix really is. If there's one thing we've learned about the study of systems in the environment, it's that nature is rarely simple. Ecosystems are composed of many complex interacting elements, and it's not preposterous to think that making changes to the atmosphere or to the oceans of the magnitude that would be necessary to offset global climate change could produce some side effects. For example, solar radiation management requires the spraying of sulfate aerosols into the upper atmosphere. There are two major consequences that could occur from that. One is the formation of sulfuric acid as the aerosols combine with water in the atmosphere and precipitate back down to Earth in the form of acid rain. This can have serious consequences for both terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. The other is that the sulfate aerosols are known to destroy ozone and could contribute to destruction of the ozone layer. How much acid rain? How much destruction of the ozone layer? It's hard to say. No one's tried anything like this before. And that's what makes people deeply suspicious. The fact that there's this uncertainty surrounding the effects. And it's not just conspiracy theorists. Personally, I'm very sympathetic to the idea that people would be uncomfortable with this. Spraying chemicals into the atmosphere to change the climate sounds like something that a James Bond villain would do. Coupled with this is the well-documented failure of scientists to always do the best job of communicating with regular folks. A recent experimental trial called SPICE in the UK was recently canceled due to public outcry. This experiment was going to use a blimp to pump water vapor up into the stratosphere. Even though it was just water vapor that was being pumped, people got very excited about this. Maybe they thought it was just water vapor this time, but it was going to be scary chemicals next time. And because the scientists hadn't done a good job consulting with people, some people saw this as a secret plan that had been uncovered at the last minute, and the trial was shut down. Finally, we get to the question of who gets to do it. What if a low-lying nation somewhere, some country that's really at risk of flooding due to climate change, decides that since the rest of the world isn't doing anything about carbon emissions, they're just twiddling their thumbs, they're going to take it upon themselves to start doing geoengineering, send up a rocket into the stratosphere. Would the rest of the world be okay with that? Probably not. But it's a really good question. Who decides? Who gets to do the experiments? Who deploys the technology? And what kind of agreement has to be in place among the nations of the world to pull something like this off? Geoengineering interventions are global by design, so we're all stakeholders in the system. And what if someone decides to take it upon themselves to do it, to go rogue and run their own experiment? Well, it already happened with a carbon dioxide removal experiment in the Pacific Northwest. A researcher got permission from some First Nations people in a coastal area of Canada to sail off the shore and dump iron filings off the back of his boat. And what he created was a giant algal bloom, just as the theory predicted. And you can see it in this picture. So it worked, but it also created a bloom of toxic microorganisms similar to a red tide. And it also got the scientific community really mad at him. And it was decried as unethical because he didn't tell anybody he was going to do it. And the experiment was conducted without the monitoring standards that you would usually deploy for an experiment of this magnitude. And his defense was, well, the world's standing by, climate change is happening, and nobody's doing anything about it. So I had to do something, and I was right to do it. This was kind of a wake-up call to the scientific community, and there's a lot of debate right now about how to manage situations like this in the future. And it's a very tough question. How do you engage stakeholders in the decision-making process when the stakeholders are everybody? So in summary, when we look at the current state of the climate system, we see that the leverage points in the system, trying to get people to use less energy and eat less meat, installing low-emission energy sources, aren't getting us as much traction as some people would like. They're not working fast enough to address the problem. So these individuals, the geoengineers, have searched the system to find new leverage points. And the result of that search are the geoengineering strategies we discussed today. Solar radiation management, in which we try to block some of the sun's energy from getting to us in the first place, and carbon dioxide removal, in which we try to increase the rate at which that carbon dioxide is taken out of the atmosphere by natural processes. The major reservation among the public and other scientists about these strategies is about their potential to cause widespread and unpredictable, and some would say systemic, changes to the Earth. And it's not like we got a spare planet laying around that we can run these experiments on. So deploying one of these strategies at a global scale will be an uncontrolled experiment by definition. And depending on your perspective, that's either really exciting or really scary stuff.